Welcome to AmeenAcademy.com. In history of Muslim world, let us discuss about Battle of Karbala. The Battle of Karbala was fought on 10th October 680, that is 10 Muharram in the year of 61 AH Hijrah of the Islamic calendar, between the army of the second Umayyad caliph Yazid I and a small army led by Husayn ibn Ali, the grandson of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, at Karbala, that's Sawad, that modern day south in southern Iraq. Prior to this death, the Umayyad caliph Muawiyah had nominated his son Yazid as his successor. Yazid's nomination was contested by the sons of the few prominent companions of Muhammad, including Husayn, son of the fourth Caliph Ali, and Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, the son of Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. Upon Muawiyah's death in 680, Yazid demanded allegiance from Husayn and other descendants. Husayn did not give allegiance to and traveled to Mecca. The people of Kufa, an Iraq garrison town and center of the Ali's Caliphate, were averse to the Syria-based Umayyad caliphs and had a long-standing attachment to the house of Ali. They proposed Husayn overthrow the Umayyads. On Husayn's way to Kufa with a retinue of about 70 men, his caravan was intercepted by 1,000-strong army of the Caliph at some distances from Kufa. He was forced to head north and encamp in the plain of Karbala on 2nd October, where a larger Umayyad army of 4,000 arrived soon afterwards. Negotiations failed after the Umayyad governor Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad refused Husayn's safe passage without submitting to his authority. A condition declined by Husayn. Battle ensued on 10th October, during which Husayn was killed along with most of his relatives and companions, while his surviving family members were taken prisoner. The battle was the start of the second fitna, during which the Iraqis organized two separate campaigns to avenge the death of Husayn, the first one by the Tawabin and the other one by Mukhtar al-Thaqafi and his supporters. Now let us discuss details further about Karbala. Muawiyah died in April 680, and Yazid, without waiting for formal election, placed himself at once upon his father's throne. Husayn. Imam Husayn held Yazid in the utmost detestation for the various faults of Yazid's character. He thought it his duty to wage war against him and thus defend the purity of Islamic faith. So, when Yazid ascended the throne, Husayn refused to swear allegiance to him and, for the sake of safety, fled from Medina and took refuge in Mecca. Abdullah, son of Zubayr, was at this time the governor of Mecca. In order to reduce the power of Abdullah, Yazid sent an army against Mecca under the control of Abdullah's own brother Amr. But Abdullah defeated this army and continued to reign in Mecca with as much power and authority as before. On account of this avowed hostility between Yazid and Abdullah, Husayn thought that it would be the safest for him to continue dwelling in Mecca under the protection of the latter. But about this time, the people of Kufa began to make a repeated request to him to come over and take up the government of Iraq. In order to ascertain the real state of affairs, Husayn sent a relative of his own named Muslim to Kufa. When the name Muslim arrived at Kufa, the people agreed at once to adopt the cause of Hussein and place themselves under his control. Muslims accordingly invited Hussein to go over as quickly as possible. Hussein resolved to act on Muslims' advice, though his friend and relatives counseled him in one voice not to place faith in any assurance given by the treacherous people of Kufa. But Hussein neglected their warning and in September 680 set forth for Kufa, attended by a small train consisting of the women and children of the family, a few of his nearest relatives, and a small circle of faithful dependents. Meanwhile, Muslim was put to death by Ubaydullah, son of Ziyad, who was then acting as Muawiyah's governor in Kufa. Hussein heard of this sad and distressing news on his way towards Kufa. He found also that the troops had been stationed by Ubaydullah at various places on the route from the Hejaz to Iraq. This made Hussein suspect that the treacherous people of Kufa had once again abandoned his side from fear of Ubaydullah. Ubaydullah now publicly called upon Hussein to offer allegiance to Yazid and dammed up the course of Euphrates in order to cut off his water supply. But Hussein refused to comply with his demand. He was still under the impression that the people of Kufa, embittered at the death of Muslim, would come over to his party. But evidently Hussein did not know the character of Kufa men. They had been tempted too far and too greatly by Ubaydullah, and Hussein realized the bitter truth and full extent of the conspiracy and intrigues of the enemy when, on reaching Iraq, he found that promised Kufan troops were conspicuous by their absence. Dejected and heartbroken, the Imam encamped at a place called Karbalāʼ on the west bank of the Euphrates, 25 miles north of Kufa, in the first part of the north month of Muharram. On the 10th of October 680, there were preparations for fierce conflict on the field of Karbala. Shortly before the battle, Omar, son of Sawad, reached the plain with an army of 4,000 men for the assistance of Ubaydullah. Hussein thought that he might expect some justice, some elementary sense of fairness among the Umayyads. So he requested they should not commit any act of oppression upon women and children. And for the sake of peace, he sent them the following overtures of conciliation. Let me return in peace to the place from where I have come. If you do not agree, confront me with Yazid and let me speak face to face with him. If you don't agree even to that, permit me to fight in arms against the enemies of Islam. The commander of the enemy's army paid not the slightest heed to this request. On the other hand, he gave immediate orders to a cruel and bloody-thirsty man named Shimar to bring Hussein at once to Kufa, alive or dead. Hopeless of success in his attempts at peace, the Imam made up his mind to fight till the last moment of his life. The battle commenced accordingly, and a cry of wailing and lamentation went up from the helpless women and children of Hussein's train. The first to be killed was Qasim, nephew of Hussein, between whom and the Imam's daughter a marriage had been recently arranged. One by one, all the Imam's followers were killed at the point of the spear. But the enemy forces were still unable to prevail against Hussein's bravery and indomitable heroism. Foiled in open attack, they now began to discharge arrows from a distance. Raging with thirst, the Imam with a little child and his breast, left the camp in the quest of water. But the fierce hail and arrows discharged by the enemy compelled him to return. And as he was returning, the child on his breast was struck by the missile. Sons and nephews all being dead, the Imam, exhausted with the labors of the battle, sat helpless and alone at the door of his tent. A woman brought him some water in order that he might allay his thirst. But as he was lifting a cup of his lips, a javelin struck him full in the mouth. Hopeless of life, the Imam rushed forward in the direction of the enemy, but spent with loss of blood, he stumbled and fell on the way. The hostile troops crowded at once upon the fallen hero, and Shimmer struck off the head from the body. The enemy's cavalry, desirous of marking the death of their contempt for the fallen foe, trampled the dead body under their horses' hoofs. This terrible and lamentable tragedy took place on 10th day of Muharram. In the history of the world, there is no parallel to the fearful persecution of which the Prophet's family were the victims. Among the male members of the family, only one survived, a little child named Zainul Abidin. To the credit of the enemy, such as it must be admitted that they offered no insult to the woman of the Imam's family or the helpless orphans in its train. This, together with a ghastly load of 70 trunkless heads, were sent to Ubaidullah at Kufa. When the miserable burden reached Kufa and the heads were thrown on the ground before Ubaidullah, a cry of horror rose from the assembled spectators. The terrible and pitiless cruelty of the victorious general struck everybody dumb. Hussein's sister, his surviving children, and his trunkless head were sent on by Ubaidullah as a present for Yazid. But at this last moment, Yazid showed a touch of grace. He treated the ladies and children with deep respect and made adequate arrangements for escorting them in safety to Medina. The men of Karbala committed to the grave the corpses of Hussein and his followers. That burial place is now regarded as one of the holiest places in the Islamic world by Shias. Meanwhile, the short head of the Imam was taken from Medina to Damascus and thence to Cairo. There it was interred with due honors. Hence, Cairo also is regarded as a holy place to the Islamic place by Shias. A deep and pathetic cry of lamentation went up from the Medina when the Prophet's family reached that city. The people began to strike their chests and their arms and cry in unison, Alas for Hussein, alas that there should be dead. He should be dead. A cry of horror and excitement thrilled through the whole of the empire. So far, we discussed about something about the Battle of Karbala. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.